Hello, everyone. Welcome to the All Out Coach podcast. My name is Tim Mikhelishvili. My friends, this is your podcast that reveals different side of you and also of all the guests that I have discussions with on my show. The people that come on this show question assumptions. They seek and find truth and a deeper level of information and potential in themselves and in creating other leaders. Today, I have a special guest. He's the author of a book called Signals. He has an electronic engineering background, has been an executive, and has started and worked for many different startup organizations. And I recently heard his review and his interview about his book, where he shared an amazing level of insight that was new and that was refreshing, and that helped me understand about the importance of evaluating the decisions that we make based on the energy and the potential that we create. So I'm excited about all of you getting to know our guest, Dan RIORDAN. Dan, how are you? I'm so happy to have you on the show.
I'm great, Tim. I really appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast. And I've listened to many of your prior episodes, and I really appreciate what we're trying to do to help people kind of further their careers, their paths, and their questioning. So it's really fun to be a part of it.
I'm glad. I'm very glad. I'd like to start with you explaining to a lot of the listeners how you embarked on your career early on.
Yeah, so the embarking on my career is a fun one. In high school, I had a really memorable moment with a high school counselor who's I was talking about what do I want to do with my life, and the counselor said, "Hey, you're really good at math. You should be in engineering." And back then, I didn't question a lot. So I applied to electronic engineering schools, and I got accepted to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo out here in California, and embarked on a path. And I really, again, I didn't question it, but I went through that, and then I graduated, and I immediately realized that I wanted to be more on the business side of corporations than I did on the actual development and designing of systems. And so I started down a journey of progressing on the business side of corporations.
Did you have mentors who led you towards your career or had a particular impact?
Yeah, I look at it, and I really had two distinct moments of mentorship that helped me. One is my own father. I was really blessed in a sense that I had a dad who really dove in with his hands, and we just experimented a lot. And we were constantly working on engines and cars and boats and building landscapes. And it really taught me to just dive in and not be afraid. And he was also an electronic engineer, and I watched him work hard and got a lot of cool things from that exposure. And then in my career, I also had another individual. His name is Jocko, and Jocko really showed me what it was like to have tremendous principles and tremendous ethics and really solid way to kind of judge and guide yourself. And Jocko had an immense impact on me. And it was really fun to be associated with him, and still great friends with him today.
I know you explain a lot of the business concepts and decision-making based on the laws of thermodynamics. Were there some patterns that you observed that propelled you in your career? What were those patterns?
Yeah, the patterns, I kind of look at it in two distinct phases. In my early part of my life, I really was focused on selfish generated, patterns. So I really didn't want to question that much because I wanted to do just what I wanted to do. And so I kind of isolated myself, and I really didn't question things. Then there's this transition that happened where I had a kind of a really big epiphany in the sense of I got a moment where I got a signal, which is where the whole book emanated from. But the signal was one of a personal nature. And it was simply, I went to my doctor, and he said, "Your blood pressure's up." And I had been going to Dr. Jeff for 20 years. And I said, "Jeff, it's impossible. I work out. I'm really on this." And he said, "Man, you're just getting old." And he goes, "This is what happens. You're getting old. Next time you're going to get put on medication." And I went out into my car that night, and I'll never forget it. I said, man, I must be doing something wrong. Something is up. And at that moment, I had this realization that I had spent a lifetime up to that point, not questioning anything, just wanting to do what I did. And I started to question everything. And I went home and I started to tear apart my personal, but at the same time, those same things rolled into the business world. And I started to question everything operationally in a very different light, which you said thermodynamics. And thermo was this great metaphor that was my favorite class in college, study of energy. And I started to think about the terms of second law of thermo, which is entropy and disorder. And I looked at systems and I started to say, okay, what is this input coming into the system, and does it cause disorder or does it cause positive potential energy? And that has led me down this amazingly fun road of kind of looking at everything from an energy perspective.
Yeah, and that's what stuck in my mind actually after reading your book and listening to you discuss your book, because what you mentioned is that, and I quote you, is that the world of work is operating under the wrong light. And you provide that analogy that the LED versus incandescent light, and that energy that's missing a little bit, that may be that question or the part of the solution for why people may not be as engaged in work, or why they change jobs so often. So what I want to ask you next is if you can explain to us how you were able to change those patterns in the business world.
Yeah. So at a really simple level, I kind of coined this phrase, what I call it your BVIs, and your beliefs, values, and where did those come from? Where did those come from? And in when you get down to it, you really start to realize that these assumptions kind of came out of all sorts of places. Could have been your family's history. It could have been something that a counselor told you. It could have been something that a friend told you, but a lot of times it's not really well thought out. So in a business sense, what I did was I started looking at each one of our system inputs. So the interview process, what are we doing? Is it intentional? And how is it that we give a great experience to the person that's looking for a job, and also a great outcome of finding people that really fit the corporation? And so each one of those things, interview process, onboarding, how we did our weekly check-ins, all the way through how our meetings ran, everything I started to look at was, how do I optimize and help this process have as minimal amount of entropy and the maximum amount of positive potential? Onboarding is a great one, because if you can onboard somebody really well, like you come in and you're ready for them, you've got everything set up, you've got their first couple of weeks scripted out, you can really minimize the entropy or disorder from a new person entering your system and really maximize how much they can contribute to your corporation. And really, really obsessing over those things from that energy lens really changed the game. And you bring up light, and light is an amazing one, because in a company, a lot of times you're sitting under these fluorescent lights and people are in dark corners and they're not being productive, or they're getting headaches, or they just don't feel their best. We never even think to say, God, could it be the light? And then when you dive in and you say, wait a minute, the way the light bulbs have evolved, they're discarding part of the spectrum that actually generates the ATP engine inside of our bodies and all of the energy that we need to run our cellular structure and everything. All of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I never even thought of that. Or like, I have a simple app on my phone, but it's called D-Minder, and it tells you when to go outside for 10 minutes to get sunlight to generate the vitamin D that you need in your body. Really simple, but it's really cool, because you go outside, you get 10 minutes of sun, you get your vitamin D, and you feel better. So just a lot of things, but really emanates back at questioning, where did your beliefs, values, and illusions come from?
Yeah, and these concepts are so timely right now in the kind of world in which we live, where we're all seeking to find that energy. And energy management among coaches, among leaders, is one of the most trending topics and problems that they're trying to solve. That particular concept, your distinction of LED versus incandescent lights, and how, yes, we may be saving costs with LED lights, but are we really increasing our energy? We may not be, right? Based on what
Right.
is. So can you elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of at the workplace? What are some other ways that you can increase the energy and the engagement when you're leading a business? How are you able to do that?
Yeah. The way I've really seen it is the number one thing that made the biggest impact was, I call it the problem definition, and really helping people define the problems better. Whether you're looking at, hey, we want to develop a whole new application, or whether it's, hey, how do we get margins to be 2% higher on a product? Whatever problem you're attacking, what I've seen over and over and over again is that it lacks in problem definition. And I had read a great book by Andy Grove, who was one of the original Intel leaders. And Andy, in his book, basically said, if you define a problem well, or if you define a problem poorly, and at the end of a development cycle, you try to go in and fix a poorly defined problem, it's 10x the cost to do it at the end versus do it at the beginning.
Yep.
And I really saw that the better we define the problem, the better the energy can be in the enterprise, because then everyone's not as frustrated as the project or the thing at hand evolves. So if I were to pick out the number one thing, it's spending time at problem definition.
The onboarding comments there that you made, they resonated with me very much, because I've spent some time working at some startups that were success stories, then others that were failures. Those that were successes, I would have to agree with you, Dan. They spent a lot of time on that onboarding. I mean, I remember one company, for example, that during the onboarding, during the orientation of a new team, they asked a question that forced everyone to reflect. They asked, "What is your legacy?" So that's not a very easy question to answer when you come into a new corporation, right? But it forces you to think a little bit. So I remember spending like over an hour probably with this team discussing the mission and trying to kind of contribute to this new startup's mission. And this company just succeeded very quickly before it was in turn acquired. So the onboarding, the interviewing also, I'd like you to maybe elaborate a little bit on some of the interviewing tips that you have on hiring the right people, and what you did and what successes you've had, because I know you talk about them a little bit in the book.
Yeah. So interviewing, it's another one like the onboarding process where,
right.
in the last startup, when we were maybe 18 people and we were just starting, up the ramp, I was pretty horrified at what we were doing from a interviewing standpoint. And it culminated one day where a candidate showed up and nobody was ready. There was no schedule, there was no plan for this person. And it was right at this point of me saying, man, I need to reframe everything around energy and around how do we maximize positive potential. So I dove in. I'd gotten a lot of inspiration from a book from Laszlo from Google. And in there, he talked about kind of the way they do some of their processes. And so what we did was, we decided we were going to interview for 3 core things: job fit, team fit, and culture fit. And then we created a set of questions around each of those areas. And then each person in the interview process was either there for job fit, team fit, or culture fit. And then we had a panel afterwards where we would discuss the comments, and we would discuss, are they in or out? Are they a good fit or not? But it gave us a very standardized process. Every candidate experienced a similar environment, and it really helped us find people that fit for us and that we fit for them. And it made a much better experience through the whole process. And it made our employees feel way more empowered in the process because they knew their role, they knew their job, they knew what they were interviewing for, and it really empowered the whole company around it. And we scaled to, 180 people fairly quickly, and we were able to do it in a way where we had high retention, we had high success. I monitored, our 90-day retention, our 1-year retention, our 3-year retention numbers, and how did we do at finding people that fit? And we were very successful at it.
Yeah. Great. That's a helpful, I think, example there. Dan, also one observation I've made is that disruption is a trending word, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the startup companies, from my experiences, my observations, they relate disruption to disorder, or that disorder or that entropy that you mentioned in the decisions that you make is that disorder. And I've seen that happen, and where I've seen teams become successful in that kind of disorderly environment is where they've taken a step back and they've asked questions, the right questions, which you focus and spend a lot of time in your book and in your in your coaching as well, and your leadership style. Because yes, disruption is not being disruptive is good, but it should not be equated to having disorder, right? You have to have some kind of direction. So what are some ways that you suggest people to ask questions that actually create positive potential?
I have a thought process and a series of 3 to 4 questions that I go through, and I like to help other people go through when I'm in any kind of a situation where I'm evaluating either a new input or new data or new information. And the simple question tree that I use is, A, is this something that I think I know, or is this something that I really know? Or if the person is presenting something in a meeting, I say, okay, is this something they think they know, or is this something they really know? Give me the data, show me the information. Let's go through that. The next question I have is, what more do I need to know to feel like I know? And so as information or data or things are being presented, I ask that question of myself. And then in a meeting, I ask a question that's, what am I supposed to really be getting from this information? And lastly, I like to ask a question which says, where did my beliefs, values, and illusions, my BVIs, come from? So if I believed our margins were 59% and somebody's in a meeting telling me 74%, where did that original 59 come from? Where did I get that concept? Did I hear it anecdotally? Did I see reports from our CFO? Where did that come from? And then why is it so much different than what's being presented? Now let's core into that and dig deeper. But I find that little simple series of questions helps me in every phase of life, whether it's my food choices, my lighting choices, my concepts that are being presented in a meeting. I use them all the time.
Well, one thing that appeals to me in your process and in your thinking is the scientific method. I've never been a physics expert in thermodynamics. I never became an expert, but I nevertheless still consider myself a scientist, given my pharmacy and pharmacology interests and background. And I deal with cutting edge scientists every day as well. So I think it's so important the way you think. I really would love to see a lot more business leaders be more critical about the decisions they make and follow the scientific method to question the methods they use. And it really falls in line with the whole concept at All Out Coach, where it's a global perspective with a sports and a science mindset to leadership and to company culture and mentorship as well. So on that note, let's take a break with a word from the sponsor, which is Anchor Podcasts. And we'll be back with Dan Riordan. Dan, so as you're questioning and you're improving your questioning strategy, then you need to separate the signals from the noise. So what are some tips that you have?
Yeah, I think at a really upper level on that is we have to get rid of this thought process around that we were invented or we were created with defects. I think there's this really weird mechanism for all of us, which is that if we believe that we have defects, then we don't question because we just assume, oh, this is just what's going to happen. And so I really call it, you got to get rid of the defect mindset. And you got to realize that that's kind of been programmed into us to have these reflex reactions to an occurrence. And we got to go above it and say, no, we're not supposed to have defects. Let's question and find out why that's actually happening. And that's in a corporation all the way down into your own personal, operation within yourself. And so I really look at that. And then I say, looking at all of the inputs, when you think of signal to noise, it's really looking at all of the inputs and being inquisitive around it. And we already talked about some of those in a corporation setting, but the list is very long on all the inputs that are at your team level, at personal performance level, all the way up to the way decisions are being made for the corporation, for new product development. In every aspect, it's really looking at all of the signals that are coming through. And I used to, when I was talking to our teams there, I'd say, look, let me know, if you see a signal in a meeting, you see a signal in the cafeteria, you see a signal, come talk to me about it, elevate it. Let's make sure we're all paying attention to all the signals that are happening within the company, because there's a lot of them going on.
And how do you define signals in your book?
So the signals is an interesting one. I look at them as where there's points of disorder showing up. And so when any kind of disorder is percolating, whether it's a conflict between two employees, whether it's a bad review on a product or a customer that's unhappy, where it's a visitor that came into your front lobby and didn't have a great experience in the way they were greeted, or the label machine that prints out their name didn't work, any of those things are signals of disorder happening in the enterprise.
Yeah.
So I really looked at it from a disorder standpoint.
I see. Yeah, your points are so consistent with a lot of the other books and articles that I've been reading, at least recently. Ron Carucci from Harvard Business Review, he also contributes to Forbes. He presents a longitudinal study over 15 years describing the different root causes of why people are dishonest at work and why they create more disorder. And one of them being cross-functional misalignment. And he provides one case of this company where a supply chain department is given $19.5 million to basically ramp up the production of a product, at the same time that the sales and marketing budgets are decreased substantially. And as a result, the incentives are different. And as a result, they actually are the subject of a lawsuit for channel stuffing to distributors because the market is just not as big. So, and that was one of the biggest predictors of people becoming dishonest and probably contributing to disorder and entropy, like you mentioned, in addition to others, as well as unclear direction, among other factors that he mentioned. Scott Belsky also, in his book The Messy Middle, he talks about the signals being those that are most impactful to your life and to your work as well. And where noise is everything else, right? And that there's notification fatigue and everything else that you may have at work. So as a leader, when you actually open up that dialogue to your employees to elevate those signals, that's such an important step of being open and to stimulating, I think, improving questioning strategy, which is the focus of your book. Now, so in terms of the decisions that people make in or corporations and business and in life, how do you increase the positive potential in the decisions that you make and the energy that you create based on the decisions that you make?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to answer. I'm going to answer it one way, and then we can circle back and discuss it different. But
Yep.
in the startup environment and scaling and in the chaos of ramping, one of the things that I noticed for my own self-reflection was, as the team was growing, I was getting bombarded with more and more demands. And so I would let, emails sit in my inbox for a couple of days. I wouldn't respond. And what I was doing was I was dragging down the positive potential of the whole company because everybody's out there waiting for my feedback and I'm not giving it to them. So I literally sat down one weekend and completely recrafted my whole strategy, which was, I got to help the corporation move forward. So I did two things. One was I said, okay, if you get me what you need from me by the end of the day today, I promise by tomorrow morning at 9:00, you will have an answer. So I gave everybody an expectation that said, get me it today, I'll have you an answer tomorrow. What that did is it freed us all up from saying, I hope he gets back to me. When will the answer come? The second thing it did was I also told people I wasn't going to be reactive in the moment, meaning if you ping me at 10 a.m., don't expect an answer by 11 because I already have my work plan for the day. Doesn't mean I won't get to it, but I will by tomorrow morning at 9, you will have an answer. The second thing is I set my day up to say, instead of this belief of saying I could multiplex across 10 different things at once and be successful, I went down and said, today, what is the number one thing I am going to get done? Bar none, I'm going to get this done. And then if I get that done, I might move to number 2 and try to work on that, but my days are pretty packed. So by having a strategy of being successful at one thing, no matter what, every day, and by telling the people on my team what to expect from me, I really increased the whole potential of the company because now we started to really move and people knew they would get a response. People knew I would get that one thing done today, no matter what. I wouldn't go home until that was done, no matter how busy I was.
Yep.
It really helped everybody operate better by me getting better myself.
What would you say is your greatest accomplishment throughout your career?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there, and I'm going to back up and do the positive and the negative in there, because you mentioned something a minute ago, which is, kind of deceit or not, things not being truthful.
Right.
And I've had to do a lot of self-reflection, and I've realized that cheating is so pervasive in our world today, and deception, cheating, whatever you want to call it. But I've realized I've done it way too much myself, where I bend the facts or I try to manipulate a situation, or I had a really horrible moment with baseball. I was a lifelong baseball fanatic. I played it pretty competitively myself.
Yeah.
And back in 2010, Derek Jeter cheated in the World Series on network TV when he said that a ball hit his bat and the ump gave him first base. And everybody applauded the fact that Jeter got on base, and it wound up having a pretty big impact.
Yep.
But I hated it. It actually ruined the game for me, because it's not what the game is about. It's not about getting on base any way you can. It's about, if Jeter would have said to the ump, you know what, that didn't hit my bat because I want to hit. I want to do it the right way.
Yep.
I would have been like, oh my God, best thing ever.
That's sportsmanlike conduct, right? That's the definition of sportsmanlike conduct, when you play by the rules and you win by the rules.
Yeah, but our society is migrating away from that. And I would say, for me, my personal disappointment myself is I cheated and decepted things way too much in life.
Feel free to to maybe explain why, maybe what were the root causes of that? Because as I mentioned, All Out Coach is the listener's podcast where it reveals different sides of us. So
yeah, I just think
feel
it's,
comfortable with.
everything. It's manipulating things so that you get the outcome that you hoped for.
So was it the pressure to perform, the
It's
culture?
pressure to perform. It's
Is that what it
pressure
was?
to,
Okay.
to look good. It's
Yep.
pressure, a lot of things.
Yep.
But what you realize is every time that you do that, it ends up causing disorder. Entropy comes. You can't defeat this great system of energy. And no matter in the short term, if you get a little boost, in the longer term, there's more and more disorder, the more and more deception. And so I would say, from a downside, that is something I'm really happy that I've tried to really overcome. And the way I state it to people is I try to operate in the truth the best I know it right now. Doesn't mean tomorrow I'm not going to learn something new from one of Tim's podcasts. A guest that comes on might enlighten me and help me even understand the deeper truth. But I try to operate the best I can within the truth, the way I understand it right now. And then on the flip side, I think the greatest accomplishment is in realizing that these signals show up. They're actually these amazingly fun intellectual suspense kind of journeys. Each signal that shows up is a phenomenal opportunity to go learn. And if you frame it in a way that, man, this is like some new intellectual, exciting thing I'm going to dive into, it creates this wonderful path to learning. Mm-hmm. And I often joke with people that I said probably the dumbest thing in my life when I graduated engineering school to my parents, because I was so tired of studying. And I'll never forget the moment I said, I'm so glad I'm done learning. I just want to go work and make money. Right. And I look back on that now and I just laugh because, my learning is exploded over time. And I'm a voracious reader and I learn more now than I've ever at any other point in my life. So kind of fun.
Yeah, just yesterday I read a great piece on INC magazine, and I thought about you, Dan, because I know you're a voracious reader, and there are four tips that Satya Nadella has shared on leadership. 4 lessons. Number 1, be a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. Number 2, bring clarity, not confusion. Number 3, create energy. And number 4, just do not make any excuses. And all 4 of those just made me think, of you and what you teach in your book and throughout your life. Clearly you've made some bad decisions, but you've learned from them, just like what you just discussed. And then you've made some great decisions. Now you teach people how to create energy with the decisions that they make, which is amazing, which I think that everyone should read this book, Signals. And also what I want to ask you, Dan, is what are you currently working on? What projects are you currently working on? Where are you creating energy now?
Yeah, no, it's neat. And thank you for those 4 tips that you just did. I just wrote them down. My current projects are many, but I'm involved in a company around food. So we're bringing healthy food solutions to the market. It's a company called Live and Breathe Solutions. I've got an e-commerce site around bringing positive messages to people, and that's a site called Megastore USA. And then I've actually got 2 more books that I'm working on. And one is a fable, and another one is kind of a book around observations, similar to a Dr. Seuss kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But I write a lot now, and really trying to share and really want to be a good servant to others and try to help.
I want to ask you if you have a particular message that you want to share with the listeners. How would you like to follow up with that person who may find this conversation interesting or enlightening to them?
Yeah, it's twofold on your answer. Number one is when I look at what helped me in my own process, there's a really interesting thing. One of our core values at our last company was love, and it's an interesting core value in a company setting, but in a very personal level was I had to really learn to just love myself. And it's a fascinating journey. And I share a fun story on that one, but I had watched a phenomenal YouTube of a lady that talked about the journey to self-love. And she had you do an exercise, which was, get in front of the mirror every morning and find one thing about yourself that you loved. You do it for 30 days. I did it. And it blew me away, because I went from maybe, not liking things to no longer caring about any of the physical and really getting deeper. So that was a really fun thing, but it was pivotal in me kind of making the journey to really want to help. And then the next thing is the follow-up is I really look at kind of three core traits. One is really get good at defining your problem. Whether it's personal, professional, wherever it is, if you can spend time on defining it, like my personal health problem definition is a really fun one. I set the problem as I want to live to 110 with full health and full vitality. So then every question I ask is, how does it give me that outcome? Same thing in work. If you want to get margins of 80%, set your problem and then really start defining back down. So the better that problem is, and then really help people ask better questions. That's something I coach on. It's something that I work on, but really, really helping people ask better questions. And then lack of purpose really deprives us of our power. And helping all of us have a real strong purpose, in helping people in work understand the purpose in life, in everyday living. Lack of purpose really deprives us of power. So I'm really a big believer in making sure that the purpose is clear.
Thank you. So how would you like them to contact you, or what do you think that ideal follow-up discussion with somebody who listens would look like with you?
People can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm available there. They can reach out via my Instagram. They can go to one of our websites, liveandbreathesolutions.com, and I have contact on there. The conversation could be anything from, hey, we'd love to have you talk to us and teach us about how to be better at interviewing or onboarding or those kind of things, or it can be much more just a personal conversation of, hey, how did you go down this journey, and what have you found? Because subtle tweaks have changed my own personal energy radically. And I'm up at 4, I rage all day with full energy. And it's exciting to have the vitality that wasn't there before I really questioned a lot of things. So happy to help.
Thank you, Dan. You've shared your transformation, and I think your transformation is going to lead to many people's transformation who are going to listen. I think we've all learned through this short period of time, I have personally, that questions are the answer, and that we need to think more critically about creating positive potential rather than entropy and disorder in the decisions that we make, and in the organizations that we lead, and the people with whom we develop relationships. So thank you very much, Dan, for all your invaluable lessons. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. It's been great getting to know you, and I hope this brings value to your listeners.
It certainly will. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Have a great day.